My name is Cassia Hale, 31 years old. I'd been counting sirens instead of sheep for months. Blue light pooling across my ceiling at 2:11 a.m., a drunk shout ricocheting down Folsom at 3:07, a delivery truck hissing brakes as dawn scraped the bay at 4:38. The Soma apartment, 2 bedrooms of walnut and glass with a slice of water view, was everything people imagine when they picture making it in San Francisco. It just wasn't livable anymore. Not for a brain that needed quiet to think and a spine that winced at every 4 a.m. horn. By day, I wrote code inside a campus with kombucha taps and a terrace garden. By night, I stared at the ceiling, calculating how many REM cycles I'd lost since January. The math was bleak. The answer was a country house. High-speed internet, I told the realtor. Trees I can hear when the wind moves. No sirens unless it's a full moon and a coyote calls 911. She laughed. 3 weeks later, she sent a listing an hour out of the city. Modest, bright, with a kitchen window that framed oak and sky. It felt like a person opening a side door and whispering, "This way out." Money was the math that mattered. I could afford the mortgage on the country place technically. It would be tight. Unless I turned the Soma showpiece into an engine. Rent it for market, maybe above. I hired a management company with a cautious reputation, looped in my lawyer to harden the lease, and spent a month sanding the edges of perfection. Fresh paint, refinished floors, sleek staging, new smart locks, a proper security system with quietly watching eyes. Before I moved, I took a detour to the house where everything used to be simple. Dad was in his chair, evening news, murmuring low. Mom's teaspoons clicked an old rhythm in the kitchen. I laid out the plan. Country house, tenants, the math that made sleep possible. "That's smart," Dad said, approving with his chin like always. "I'm proud of you." "You're renting to strangers?" Mom asked, already burdened. "They could destroy the place." "That's why I hired professionals. Background checks, airtight lease." The front door opened mid-syllable. Jennifer in a whirlwind of backpacks and voices, 3 kids boomeranging off furniture and memory. She was 7 years older, divorced, always out of breath from a life that never seemed to catch up to her. "You're renting the Soma place?" she said, dropping onto the couch. "To who?" "Qualified tenants," I said carefully. "The rent covers the country mortgage." "Rent it to me and the kids," she said, the way people name the weather. "What?" "Our apartment is a shoebox. Your place is huge. Great schools. It's perfect." "I need the rental income," I said, "full market." Her smile vanished, the way a light goes out in a storm. "You're going to charge your own sister rent?" "That's what renting is," I said, keeping my voice even. "So greedy, Cassia. You make more than I ever will. You can afford 2 places. I'm raising 3 kids alone." "Jennifer has a point," Mom said, stepping in with a tray and the old theology. "God blesses so we can share. Family helps family." "I always help," I said softly. "But this is an investment. It's not a donation." "You don't know what real responsibility is," Jennifer snapped. "You think about money and yourself." "I'm not debating this," I said, standing. "I'm renting it to paying tenants. Final." "You're ungrateful," she shouted as I reached the door. "We're family." On the drive back, guilt kept trying to get in the passenger seat. I locked the doors. I had spent 7 years building a life, brick by sleepless brick. Jennifer wanted me to make it hers. Love doesn't mean unlocking your house to a thief you're related to. I moved to the country house the following week. At night, the dark was so complete it felt like water. The first morning I woke rested. I cried in the shower from relief. 2 days later, Michael from the management company called. "We have a couple," he said, pleased. "Engineers at Google. Great credit. Mr. and Mrs. Chen. They love the photos. Want to tour Friday at 2. Friday, we met in the lobby. A handshake, a polite elevator ride, me picturing their names on a lease and my chest unclenching for the first time in months. I unlocked the door to 714 and said, "Please come." The word died. My apartment looked like a daycare after a hurricane. The walnut coffee table I'd paid too much for was shoved against the wall under a cereal box. The gray-green sofa wore a cartoon blanket like shame. The rug was a landmine of plastic. My $400 art book lay open under crayons carving hard color into glossy paper. Jennifer was on my couch in sweatpants, chips in a bowl, cartoons blaring, totally at home in a life that wasn't hers. Emma, the youngest, ran a marker over the arm of the sofa like she was signing for delivery. Mrs. Chen inhaled softly and touched her husband's arm. "We should go," she whispered. "Please," I started, but Mr. Chen was already apologizing for a mess he hadn't made, backing into a future that didn't include my lease. Michael's face was professional panic. "I'll call you," he said, and followed them into the hallway where my perfect tenant timeline shattered quietly. It was just me and my sister then, and the 3 small storms we both loved but couldn't protect from what was coming. "Get out," I said, voice low. Jennifer laughed without looking away from the TV. "Mom gave me a spare key. We moved in yesterday. This is our home now." "This is my property," I said. "You're trespassing." "Oh, come on," she said. "We're family. You're not actually going to do anything. If you don't like it—" She finally looked at me, eyes sparking with the dare she'd been waiting to throw my whole life. "Call the police." Something cold clicked into place. "Okay," I said. I pulled out my phone. Her smile faltered. "Wait, what are you doing?" "911, the operator said. "What's your emergency?" "I need to report an illegal entry into my apartment," I said clearly. "Multiple individuals refusing to leave. I am the owner." Jennifer lunged for my phone. I stepped back, giving the operator my address, the unit number, my name spelled slow. The kids started crying the way kids do when the air changes pressure. "You can't do this," Jennifer said, panic rising. "I'm your sister." "You told me to call," I answered. "This isn't a family matter anymore. It's legal." I rode the elevator to the lobby, on legs that remembered walking into interviews that would change my life. 10 minutes later, 2 officers stepped through the glass. Martinez, older and steady. Thompson, younger, eyes scanning without judgment. "I'm the owner of 714, I said, holding out my ID, then the digital deed, the HOA records, the fresh lease draft with no names on it. "Let's take a look," Martinez said. We rode up in silence. When I opened the door, Jennifer froze like a deer, too stunned to run. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said, gentle but firm, "the owner has asked you to leave. You'll need to gather your things." "She's my sister," Jennifer said, shaking, turning to me for the old play we always ran. "This is a family issue." "Family status doesn't change property law," Officer Thompson said evenly. "If the owner wants you out and you refuse, that's trespassing." "You're ruining my life!" Jennifer screamed, a sound that made the kids wail harder. She moved too fast, toward me, toward a door that didn't exist, and Thompson caught her arm. "Ma'am, stop!" She kept pulling, kept shouting. Martinez moved in. Within seconds, her wrists were cuffed, not roughly, but with the inevitability that follows 1,000 warnings. My phone rang. "Mom," I hit speaker. "What have you done?" she shrieked. "Jennifer says the police—" "I called like Jennifer told me to," I said. "This wouldn't be happening if you hadn't given her my spare key." "How dare you?" Mom cried. "She's your sister. Those are your niece and nephews." "She's 38, I said quietly. "She's a mother and an adult. She's responsible for this." "You heartless—" "Your kindness taught her to take," I said, voice steadier than I felt, "and never face consequences. That ends now." I hung up. The officers guided Jennifer toward the door as the kids reached for her in a confusion that broke my heart and didn't change my mind. I bent, met Jennifer's eyes. "You will never enter my home again without permission," I said. "From now on, if you need help, you ask Mom and Dad. Not me, not my property." In the hall, the elevator dinged. Inside the apartment, the cartoon kept playing, absurd and loud, as if a different life might still be possible if we just turned the volume up. I took a breath that smelled like chips and wax crayons and the metal tang of a decision you can't take back. Then I called a locksmith and told him to meet me in 30 minutes. The locksmith arrived with a tackle box of small salvations and a voice like fresh gravel. "Deadbolt, cylinder, and the building core," he said, glancing at the officers still in my doorway. 30 minutes if nobody argues." "No one here is arguing," I answered, and that was true. The cartoon in the background finally cut to commercial. The apartment exhaled. Officer Martinez waited with me in the kitchen, eyes on the kids, while Officer Thompson took Jennifer to the elevator. "Someone you trust to pick them up?" he asked carefully. I scrolled to my father's number. "Yes." When Dad answered, his voice was low and steady. Dad the negotiator, Dad the fixer. I gave him the floor number and hung up before he could try to make a speech. The locksmith unscrewed the first plate, and the sound, bright and metallic, felt like a bell tolling for an old habit. New keys laid on the counter, their teeth like small silver promises. He swapped the cylinder, then the core for the building's common area key. When he finished, he lined 3 tags across the counter, labeled them in neat block letters, 7 and 14. Owner, do not duplicate. Any spares floating around? He asked. My mother had one, I said. Not anymore. He nodded like he'd heard this before, in too many versions, in too many families. Sign here. Dad and Mom arrived together with a hush that pretended to be dignity. Mom went straight to the children, old instincts clicking back into place. Dad took in the damage, the marker on the sofa, the toys like tripwires, the art book gouged into a new topography, and his mouth pressed into a line I knew from report cards and funerals. What did you do? He asked finally. I protected my property within the law, I said, calm because anything else would be expensive. We're family, Cassia. I've heard that word weaponized enough for one lifetime, I answered. You gave Jennifer my key without asking. You taught her she could take and never pay. That ends now. You'll need to pick up the kids. The officers can tell you where to collect Jennifer. Mom looked up, eyes full of righteous fire that used to burn me. You are not our daughter, she hissed. Relief landed in my body like a chair I finally let myself sit in. Good, I said softly. Then you can stop calling me like I owe you my life. Dad flinched. Mom clutched the kids tighter. The officers kept their distance and their patience. Paperwork exchanged hands. The door shut behind my parents, and their footsteps faded down the hall into the building's well-behaved silence. I boxed Jennifer's scattered belongings, 2 tote bags of clothes, a stack of homework worksheets, a chipped mug with "World's Best Mom" in cracked gold. I labeled the cartons with my parents' address and scheduled a courier. Then I stood in the wreckage of what used to be my sanctuary and made a list: upholstery cleaner, rug shampoo, art book replacement, if possible, a new policy for my own heart. 5 hours later, the apartment looked like itself again, or close enough for the night. I drove back to the country house with the windows cracked, letting the dark and the freeway peel the city off my skin. When I pulled into the gravel drive, the oaks stood like witnesses. Inside, the quiet was not empty, it was mine. I slept like a person who had finally decided to believe her own version of events. Morning made coffee. I sat with the mug pressed to my sternum and dialed Michael. I'm so sorry, he blurted before hello could land. That was an ambush, completely unacceptable. It happened, I said. What do we do now? I'll restart the tenant search. I'll also flag the unit in our internal system, so no agent ever walks anyone through without us securing the door ourselves, okay? I'm covering the cost of a deep clean and staging refresh. Give me a week, Cassia. I'll bring you someone impeccable. Thank you, I said, surprised to hear the gratitude sound like relief rather than surrender. Just after noon, my phone lit with Mom's name. I watched it ring out. It rang again. I let it. A third time, then a voicemail, then a text. How could you do this to your sister? The words sat on my screen like a script performed in a dozen eras of our house. I turned the phone face down and stepped out onto the back porch, where the air tasted like rain and oak and absence. That night, I walked the perimeter of the property with a flashlight and the slow steadiness of someone drawing a line in new earth. I wasn't thinking about trespassers. I was thinking about thresholds. How you can live years with the door propped open and not notice the draft until you shut it and realize you've been cold for a decade. On day 2, a courier texted that the boxes had been delivered to my parents' address. On day 3, the building manager emailed to confirm that the master key for 714 was logged, changed, and secured. No more surprise entries, no more borrowed kinship at the lock. On day 4, the silence started to feel like a sound I could hum along to. I tried to picture Jennifer in a courtroom. I couldn't. Officer Martinez had hinted charges might be amended. First offense, 3 kids, a DA who didn't love pushing a mother into a record that would follow her forever. I didn't want her life ruined. I wanted my boundary respected. Those 2 things could exist in the same sentence. They had to. On day 5, I drove into the city for a meeting, and the skyline met me with the specific indifference of steel and fog. In the lobby of my building, the concierge lifted his eyebrows in a private question. I lifted one back. Locks are good, he said, sotto voce. Always were on your side. The apartment greeted me with lemon and quiet. Staging stood at attention. The rug was a clean ocean again. On the coffee table lay a note from the cleaning crew. Sorry about the marker. Got it all but a whisper. We left a gentle warning card about shoes and crayons for future tenants. I smiled despite myself. People were moving around me, solving problems I used to try to swallow alone. My phone rang. "We've got interest," Michael said. "A pair of Japanese executives in town on a long assignment. Their company will underwrite. They're serious." That was fast. "Sometimes the universe speeds up after we do the hard thing," he said, not quite joking. I hung up and walked to the window. The bay shone a thin silver. From up here, sirens were only threads in a tapestry I no longer had to sleep under. That evening, Dad called. No voicemail, just one ring and a hang-up, his old signal that he'd tried, that his conscience could sleep. I didn't call back. I went for a walk under a sky untroubled by helicopters. I listened to leaves talk to each other. When I came home, the house had cooled like a body at peace. 3 days later, Jennifer texted from a number I didn't recognize. "You ruined me." I typed, deleted, typed again, deleted again. I put the phone down. A boundary is not a speech. It's a door you close and keep closed without needing to justify the hinges. At the end of that first week, I realized what felt so strange in the spaces between tasks. No one needed me to abandon my day to fix their emergency. No frantic calls at lunch. No. "Can you send money just this once?" No. They'll listen if it comes from you. The quiet was a shade of luxury I had never budgeted for. I stood in my kitchen at twilight, watching the tree line turn to cut paper against a bruised sky, and thought, this is the loudest piece I've ever heard. I worried about the kids. Of course I did. Emma's solemn marker lines on my sofa arm, and the middle one's habit of counting toys under his breath. Little details stuck to me. But worrying about children didn't require underwriting their mother's worst lesson. If I caved now, I'd be teaching them what I had learned too well, that love equals erasure. The weekend came and went without drama, a sentence I wanted to frame and hang. On Monday, Mrs. Rhodes, the building's HOA president and our unofficial conscience, left me a brief voicemail. "Hard choices, Ms. Hale. You made the right one." I saved it, not as proof, but as a weather report. Forecast clear, some lingering fog in pockets. When Michael called again, his voice carried a current of triumph. "They loved it," he said. "Impeccable references, spotless credit, and, brace yourself, they're offering 20% above market and 2 years up front. Relocation budget. They want stability." 2 years up front. It was like someone had opened a window inside my ribcage. "Send the contract," I said. "I'll have my lawyer review it today." After we hung up, I pressed my palms to the cool of the counter and let the air move through me. Consequences had knocked. I had answered. The sky didn't crack. A better future stepped over the threshold and set down a suitcase. Night settled. Out past the porch, crickets stitched an ordinary song, and for the first time I could remember, ordinary felt like a victory I had earned. By the time the ink dried on the lease, the Japanese couple's payment had cleared. 2 years of rent, deposited in one clean transfer. I refreshed my account twice, just to be sure the numbers stayed real. The mortgage on the country house was now covered through next spring, and for the first time in years, my finances felt like an ocean without hidden undertow. Michael sent photos of the tenants standing in my apartment, smiling, shoes off, polite posture. "They're perfect," he said. "Left a note thanking you for trusting them with your home." I closed my laptop and stared at the message for a while. Trust. The word looked new in my inbox. The next morning, I packed a suitcase. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, just set my work email to out of office and booked a week in Maui. No notifications, no family emergencies, no San Francisco skyline slicing my sleep, just salt air and silence. When I landed, the air felt like a warm apology. The ocean outside my window moved in slow, patient breaths. For 7 days, I practiced the art of doing nothing, slept until sunrise, read paperbacks with broken spines, floated until my skin pruned. My mind stopped rehearsing arguments. My heart stopped flinching at phone vibrations that never came. I thought about Jennifer only once, standing knee-deep in the surf, watching a line of waves collapse and reform. She'd always been that way, crashing forward, expecting others to rebuild what she broke. For a moment, guilt tried to find me again. It didn't. I let it go with the tide. When I returned home, the country house welcomed me, like it had been waiting. My porch plants had doubled in size. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. On the counter sat a single envelope from my management company, first month check, spotless inspection report, Tenants, delighted and respectful. The quiet had shape now. It wasn't hollow, it was earned. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number, East Coast area code. Cassia, a woman's voice said, warm, crisp, unmistakably confident. It's Aunt Margaret. I straightened instinctively, the way I used to when someone reasonable entered a room. Aunt Margaret, wow, it's been too long, she said. Your mother's been calling everyone crying about the incident. I wanted to hear it from you. I exhaled. I didn't plan for any of it to happen that way, but she and Jennifer left me no choice. I know, Margaret said simply. You did the right thing. The validation landed like sunlight on cold skin. She avoided criminal charges, she continued. First offense, 3 kids, sympathetic DA. But the arrest is public record. Word got around. Word always does. She's renting a small place now, out near Daly City. Bad neighborhood, cheap. She's working 2 part-time jobs, retail and daycare. The kids are getting by. I sat down at the table, tracing a fingertip around my mug. And my parents? They're embarrassed, Margaret said. Not about what Jennifer did, about what people think. They've stopped talking to half the family to control the story. I let the silence between us stretch. Cassia, listen to me, she said finally. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep anyone else warm. You worked hard. You protected what you built. That's not greed, that's wisdom. I swallowed the knot forming in my throat. Thank you. They call it selfishness when you stop being convenient, she added dryly. Don't fall for it. We talked for another 20 minutes. Safe topics, lighter things. When she hung up, the house felt different. The kind of quiet that hums, not because something's missing, but because something has finally settled. Days slipped into a rhythm. Morning runs through the fog, hours of code, coffee cooling faster than my focus. Evenings on the porch with a book and a mind uncluttered by guilt. Sometimes, when the sky turned lavender and the wind caught the trees just right, I'd imagine Jennifer somewhere under the same sky, probably juggling late shifts, maybe tucking the kids into bed. I didn't wish her harm. I wished her understanding of me, of boundaries, of the moment everything changed. Because what happened in that apartment wasn't about property. It was about permission, the kind she'd taken her whole life and the kind I'd stopped giving. One Saturday morning, I walked through the small farmer's market outside town. The woman selling honey recognized me. You're the tech lady who bought the White House by the Ridge, she said. I laughed. That's me. Peaceful place, isn't it? The most peaceful I've ever known. Then you did something right, she said, handing me a jar. I thought about that all the way home. Maybe doing something right doesn't always look kind. Sometimes it looks like standing alone in an empty apartment, calling the police while your family calls you a monster. But I'd rather be the villain in their story than a prisoner in mine. That evening, Margaret texted again. Heard your parents sold their house. Downsizing. Pride's expensive. And Jennifer, I typed back, still working, still angry, but maybe learning. I set the phone down, watching the last light fade across the yard. I felt compassion. Not enough to reopen a door, but enough to hope she'd someday stop breaking her own windows. Inside, the kettle whistled. The scent of chamomile filled the kitchen. I poured a cup, opened the back door, and stepped into the night. The stars above the ridge looked close enough to touch, quiet, infinite, and entirely indifferent to the noise we call family. For once, that didn't make me feel small. It made me feel free. Time has a strange way of stretching when there's no chaos to fill it. Days no longer felt like fires to put out, but rooms to walk through slowly. I woke when sunlight filtered through the blinds, not when my phone buzzed. My mornings were quiet, deliberate. Coffee, coding, the sound of birds. A year passed like that, then another. The Japanese couple renewed their lease, sending another transfer that landed as cleanly as the first. Michael's quarterly updates were always the same, immaculate tenants, not a single complaint. I started to believe peace could actually be sustained, not borrowed. My work thrived too. 2 promotions, a 20% raise, and a new project that challenged me without devouring me. I'd learned to log off when the day ended, to separate work from life, and to fill that space with small joys. Painting, baking, reading novels I'd been too tired to finish before. And always the quiet. Sometimes it still startled me. I'd pause mid-morning, realizing that no one had demanded anything from me all week. No text dripping guilt, no emergencies that weren't mine to solve. The absence was both unfamiliar and beautiful, like finally hearing my own heartbeat after years of noise. Aunt Margaret called occasionally, her voice the only family thread I'd kept. She didn't ask about reconciliation, only about whether I was still sleeping well, still finding purpose. Your parents downsized, she said once. Smaller house, fewer visitors. Your father says it's for simplicity. I think it's because pride is expensive. And Jennifer? I asked. She's in the same apartment. 2 jobs. The neighborhood's rough. The kids are growing fast. They're surviving. I closed my eyes, picturing them. Emma with her wild hair, the boys who'd turned my living room into a racetrack that afternoon 2 years ago. They didn't deserve that, I murmured. No, Margaret said softly, but she made those choices. You didn't. We were both quiet for a moment. Then she added, Do you ever regret it? I've asked myself that, I admitted, every time I think about those kids. But no, I don't regret it. If I hadn't stopped her, I'd still be funding her mistakes. Maybe she'd still be teaching them that manipulation works. Good, Margaret said. Regret is for people who didn't learn the lesson. You did. Months slipped by. I stopped marking family holidays on my calendar. They didn't apply anymore. Thanksgiving dinners became friends' potlucks. Christmas was quiet evenings with a glass of wine and a book by the fireplace. Sometimes I'd receive updates I hadn't asked for, a relative's Facebook post about Jennifer working late shifts, a tagged photo of my parents at a community event, faces older, smiles thinner. I never felt vindicated, just distant. I'd stopped trying to make them villains, stopped needing to make myself a saint. It was just a story now, a true one, but finished. One gray afternoon, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in an uneven scrawl I recognized instantly. Jennifer's handwriting. For a long time, I didn't open it. I made tea, cleaned the kitchen, answered work emails, pretending I wasn't aware of it, sitting there like a heartbeat. When I finally did, the note inside was short. Cassia, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know the kids are okay. They remember you. Emma still talks about your art books. I hated you for what you did. I probably still do sometimes, but I also know you were right. Jay. I read it twice, then set it on the counter and stared at it until the ink blurred slightly under a stray tear I hadn't planned to shed. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't break the silence we'd both earned. But that night, I lit a candle for her and the kids, not for reconciliation, just for acknowledgement. The next morning, the world was the same. The birds sang. My inbox filled with project updates. Peace remained. And for the first time since the day I'd locked that apartment door behind me, I realized I didn't carry anger anymore, only understanding. One evening, I walked to the ridge behind my house. The sun had just dipped low, turning the hills gold. I thought about what Aunt Margaret had said once, that you can't build a new life while dragging the old one behind you like luggage. She was right. If I'd handed Jennifer that apartment, I wouldn't have been standing here. I'd still be cleaning her messes, fielding my mother's accusations, bending my life to keep theirs upright. Instead, I'd built something that could finally breathe. The wind picked up, scattering oak leaves across the dirt trail. I watched them tumble, free and unanchored, and thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. Not forgiveness, not reunion, but release. When I walked back to the house, the porch light flicked on automatically. I smiled at the small, practical miracle of it. I was home, not running from anyone, not waiting for approval, just living. And the silence, the same silence that used to scare me, now felt like safety. Late that night, a message from Aunt Margaret arrived. Just checking in. You sound happy in your last email. Hold on to that, Cassia. Not everyone gets to build a second life from the rubble of their first. I smiled, closed my laptop, and looked out into the dark yard where the wind moved softly through the trees. She was right. Peace wasn't something I'd found. It was something I'd built. One boundary, one decision, one quiet evening at a time. 2 years to the day since Jennifer was arrested, the sun set over my ridge like an old friend returning without drama. The sky bled gold into rose, the light stretching across the kitchen table where I was eating dinner alone, but not lonely. I'd learned that solitude isn't emptiness. Its space finally returned to its rightful owner. My life had settled into a rhythm that didn't require survival. Morning coffee, work calls, walks at sunset. My days were filled not with noise, but with presence. Peace wasn't thrilling, but it was solid. It was mine. After dinner, I sat on the porch and watched the trees sway, the same ones that had listened to every version of me. The one who bent, the one who broke, and the one who finally stopped apologizing for standing tall. It's strange how often I still thought about that day in my apartment, not with bitterness, but curiosity about how a single choice can redraw the architecture of your entire life. If I had said yes to Jennifer, if I had given her what she wanted, everything else would have fallen apart like dominoes. I'd still be exhausted, bailing out people who mistook love for obligation. I'd still be someone's scapegoat, someone's safety net, someone's never enough. Instead, I'd built something real, a life that didn't depend on approval, a peace that wasn't rented out to guilt. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. Aunt Margaret's name glowed on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," she said when I answered. "Just checking in. You sound happier every time I talk to you." "I am," I admitted. "It's quiet here, but the kind of quiet that feels earned." She chuckled softly. "Good. That's the best kind. You've stopped looking backward." "I still think about them sometimes," I said. "The kids, mostly." "I know you do, but don't mistake compassion for invitation." "I won't," I promised. Before hanging up, she added something that stayed with me. "Peace doesn't mean forgetting. It just means choosing not to reopen old wounds every time they stop bleeding." Later that week, I got an email from Michael, short and efficient as always. Tenants would like to renew for another 2 years. Everything immaculate as usual. They asked me to tell you they love your apartment. It feels like home. Home. The word hit me harder than I expected. Because that was the truth of it. I'd been chasing the feeling of home my entire life, confusing it with family, with forgiveness, with other people's comfort. But home wasn't a place or a person. It was peace. It was boundaries that held firm even when people called them walls. It was being able to stand in your own space and breathe without fear of being invaded. A few months later, I was sitting on that same porch when a small white envelope slid through my mailbox slot. No name this time, just the faintest smudge of blue ink. Inside, a photograph. Emma, my niece, the youngest, grinning at the camera. A little older now, missing a tooth. On the back, 3 words written in a child's uneven scrawl. "Thank you, Auntie. No return address." I traced the photo with my thumb, smiling. Maybe Jennifer had sent it. Maybe Emma had done it herself. It didn't matter. It wasn't about reopening doors. It was about acknowledgement. A quiet, wordless bridge that didn't demand crossing. I set the photo on my desk beside a candle and left it there, not as an invitation to the past, but as proof that the story could end without war. That night, I watched the sunset from my kitchen window. The house was still, every corner softly humming with the sound of its own contentment. I thought about everything that had led me here, the sirens that once sang me to sleeplessness, the apartment that turned from pride to prison, the family that mistook love for possession, and the moment I finally said no. If I'd learned anything, it was this. Saying no isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And sometimes clarity costs peace before it gives it back. I blew out the candle beside Emma's photo and whispered a small truth to the dark. "You taught me what not to become," I said to the memory of my family. "And that was the greatest gift you ever gave me." Then I locked the door, turned off the lights, and went to bed in a house that didn't feel empty. It felt free. Outside, the wind moved through the oaks with the same quiet rhythm it always did. Steady, gentle, unbothered. For years, I thought freedom would sound like applause. But it doesn't. It sounds like silence, finally safe enough to trust.